Date, August, year redacted. Physician's name, Hart Gregor A. Patient's name, Little Allen. Sex male, age 23, birth date redacted. Case notes. Patient has received electroconvulsive treatment for the past 6 months. At the start of the treatment, he showed progress and promise in this being the right course of action. But as of writing this report, things have taken a horrific turn. The behavioral changes I noted previously as non-issue have become more prominent and aggressive. Patient has reverted to an alarming level of delusion and has adopted a new personality. In one-on-one sessions with the patient, my observations have found that he has taken to wearing a top hat made of paper we allow in his room. I recall a similar character from the patient's tales of the imaginary Wonderland and suspect the two may be connected. Whether or not this incident was caused by the treatment is unclear, but as his physician, I take full responsibility for what has happened to this young man. I'm truly heartbroken to report my failures. Treatment is as follows. Continue electroconvulsive treatments as a means to suppress and or contain the patient's alternative personality. Be warned that excessive use may put patient in a permanent state of mental vegetation. I'm sorry, Alan. I hereby revoke any and all opportunities for rehabilitation and release. This ban is to be effective for as many days as the patient lives. Chapter 17. Flipping the Hourglass. The morning sun rose to meet the day that would mark the end of days for the beings of Wonderland. The darkness that the black royalty introduced to the kingdom had become a beast of its own, a living, breathing entity that devoured the light of the sun and the hope that came with it. The more it devoured, the stronger it became, and soon it was as though the sun never rose at all. Whether the sun was in the sky or not made little difference to the White Queen, who, while in the dungeon of her sister's castle, was not far from the heart of this evil. It had seeped into everything, the corners of her cell, her dreams, and her mind. Its constant presence had left her even weaker than when I met with her, not far from death. However, as much as the black royalty had hoped their magic would taint her heart and break her spirit, she remained a dimly lit beacon of hope. Though she knew she could do nothing to aid me in my quest for the rose, she prayed often and hard for my success. God chose to answer these prayers subtly by returning the rose necklace she had given me to its rightful place around her neck. As it phased into existence, she knew what this meant, and used what energy she could spare to smile as her eyes filled with tears. Before she could be too overjoyed, the door of her cell opened and the King of Clubs strolled in. Feeling at home in the shadows, he didn't carry a torch, as I did on my visit. Instead, he walked over in stride and unshackled White's arms from the wall. Unable to hold herself up, she collapsed in an exhausted heap at the king's feet. "You can't die yet, niece. There is still so much we want you to witness," he hissed as he took her roughly by the arm and lifted her to her feet. Unable to walk on her own, the king saw fit to drag her to wherever it was he wanted her to go. She didn't say a word while her toes were being dragged across the hard, cold floor of the dungeon, nor when the light of the throne room burned her eyes. But words absolutely escaped her when she was thrown to the ground as they came outside. She struggled to lift her head off the ground where she lay, but did so just enough to see her aunt standing before her, looking up at the dark clouds that swirled overhead. "A storm is coming, the likes of which your kingdom has never seen," the king said, as he too watched the sky. He was right. Wonderland had never seen a storm like this, and may never again. This was no normal storm. It contained far more than just wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. Something monstrous hid behind the clouds, and was given away only by the flashes of lightning outlining the silhouettes. Hundreds of Jabberwockies soared in step with the clouds as they were followed by hundreds more. Soon the Queen of Spades would unleash this unholy nightmare on the people of Wonderland. White could only hope we were ready. "Do you know what this is, White?" asked the king as he picked her up once again from the ground. "This is the end of an age." White could only look on in horror as she watched one of the great beasts land in front of them. Once again, her uncle was right. For either the good or bad of all, the age of her rule would end by nightfall. Chapter 18. The Last Grain of Sand. Storm clouds gathered in the weary eyes of 2 sentries who kept their post on the roof of White's castle. From behind the rampart, they could see the genesis of a very violent storm in the distance, headed straight for them. As it gathered momentum, it fed on the entire sky, sucking the life from it and leaving it black as night. When this parasite had full control of its host, what remained was a wall that rumbled and flashed with malevolence. Without warning, the wall bared its teeth, and it displayed its dominance over the atmosphere by hurling gale winds as sharp as blades at the castle. The knights, who found themselves caught in the gusts, struggled to keep upright and out of harm's way. Just when it seemed as though the entire castle was about to give way to the storm, it relinquished its attack. As it died down to a constant howl, the knights regained their footing while they worked to understand what just happened. "What is that?" the younger of the 2 knights asked, with fear in his throat. Though more experienced, the other knight couldn't find any explanation that would keep his young comrade together. All he knew was the longer he watched the storm, as it charged closer to them, the sicker to his stomach he became. He turned his head and watched a nearby ballista tremble as the wind moaned through it. "I think it's time we ordered everyone to their positions," he finally said, in concern after some thought. When the other knight didn't move, he provided the correct motivation. "Now!" he barked, as he watched the young man scurry off the roof. As the 1 sentry remained at the post, the storm began to drizzle. While the White Queen knew what was coming, having seen it from the start, her castle and all the men inside it had no idea. They had no clue that with each flash of lightning and crack of thunder, the enemy inched closer and closer. Drizzle turned to downpour, and was whipped at the castle by returning winds. The wall of storm had crept close enough to cause the thunder to shake the very foundations of the castle. This startled my friends, who had gathered in the throne room to await the war together. Sitting on the throne, with a pipe in his mouth, was a Tweedle, dumb to be specific. Resting on the back of the throne, as usual, was Chesh, and seated on the floor in front of the throne was the March Hare and the Dormouse. The two of them were partaking in a cup of tea, as usual. "I reckon the time is near, lads," said Dum with a long drag of his pipe. "Are you sure we have to fight without Allen? He should be along any minute," the March Hare said, before being startled again by the thunder. This caused him to miss his mouth completely when he took a drink. Having nearly drowned in his tea, he let out a mixture of coughs and giggles. While trying to both help the hare and salvage every drop of tea he could, Dormouse fielded the question. "Right you are, Hare. The hero will be just a titch late for the party, that's all. We just have to kick off the festivities and whatnot, and he'll be around shortly," he said between hiccups. Chesh saw fit to respond here with a snide remark. Ah, how touching, such reassurance from a drunk rat. Dormouse took offence to this, and stood up on wobbly legs to scold the cat. "All right, so I admit. I may have had too much to drink. Might even be a bit snockered, but in my defence, this may be the very last drop of tea I ever have. Same as that might be the last rude comment you say to me, kitty cat." Chesh chuckled as his grin spread wide. "Don't be so sure." Before the argument could escalate further, Dum cut them off, barking at them both. "Enough. We have far more important things to focus on than your silly bickering. Allen is counting on us to hold things down until he returns, so we need to work together." "He's right, you know," answered Dee, as he came into the throne room from the armory, with his arms full. "Where have you been, brother?" Dum inquired. "Just picking through things," he answered, as he dropped an armload onto the ground. "I figured this fight would call for more than shillelaghs and soup ladles. For us, brother, hand axes. This way anything bigger than us can be chopped down to size. And for you, Hare, I fashioned a spear out of Hadder's cane. Deadlier to a few more things than just soup, eh? For you, Dormouse, if you're going to join the ranks properly, you'll be needing a shield to go with that dagger." He handed the Dormouse what looked to be a marble knob off of a drawer. "Thanks, mate," the Dormouse hiccuped. Everyone stood and accepted their gifts graciously for a time before Chesh started to chuckle to himself, which got the group's attention. "Well, isn't this something? This will be crafted from the same cloth of history as the legend of the Crystal Rose. 2 leprechauns, a deranged hare, and an inebriated mouse, the last defense of Wonderland." "Hey, and don't forget a mangy cat," snapped the Dormouse playfully. Though Chesh wanted to weave a clever rebuttal, he was disrupted by a horn sounding an alert. "This is it, fellas," Dum shouted, as the group frantically prepared themselves. "Remember the plan and formations. Dee and I will lead the roof. Hare and Mouse will lead the courtyard, and Chesh, you will go wait for Allen, and lead him to wherever he needs to go upon returning." With orders clear and everyone off to their proper place, the Knights of the White Rose marched off to war, our war. In the wind and rain stood White's chess pieces, ready to defend their queen, who, while absent from her throne, had not abandoned her people. Allen's orders to prepare for an airborne attack had been heeded. A total of 8 ballista had been put in position, with one in each corner of the roof and 2 placed on each side of the courtyard, with the second group of men in the middle. The storm was right in front of the army now, making it difficult to hear anything that wasn't weather. But the Tweedles did their best to call out orders, with the same ones being echoed by the March Hare and Dormouse below them. "Ballista ready," Dum yelled, his brother shouting the similar order of "Archers ready." With both ballista and bow loaded and aimed at the sky, Dum added, "Keep them at bay with your spears if they come too close for ranged." Uneasiness wafted over the army as they awaited any sign of the enemy. Between the claps of thunder they could hear the wings of Jabberwockies from somewhere in the wall of clouds. "Hold! Hold!" the brothers shouted in unison. There was an eerie moment of silence where not even the rain seemed to make noise. It quickly came to an end, however, when blood-curdling roars rang out from all over the sky. With just a millisecond's delay, all four of my friends took a breath before screaming the order that would begin the end for them all. "Fire!" The sounds of war were quick to echo throughout Wonderland as a hail of arrows and spears were launched into the clouds at the monsters they once hid. They collided furiously, with the castle's first barrage breaking through the front line of winged horrors. Volley after volley was sent into the sky as the strategy seemed to be holding up on both fronts. It caused the beasts to veer off course to avoid the onslaught eventually, as expected though. The Jabberwockies punched through the artillery and reached the knights. What distance had been created was now non-existent, as the storm was now centered on top of them. "Spears up!" the Tweedles cried, as they themselves fought to dodge claws and teeth from all directions. Looking around, the brothers watched their men fight valiantly while being encircled. When they started to see that standing and fighting was failing, they came to the harsh realization that to keep the battle on the roof would lead to a massacre. They needed more room. "Fall back to the field," they cried, ordering the ballista to keep them covered so they could escape. Not all the men managed to make it off the roof, but a good number followed the Tweedles into the castle. The situation for the Mouse and Hare was a little different and grimmer. Jabberwockies had set the balcony on fire, just like the night that Hatter died. This pushed the line back away from the ballista. Not only that, but upon the same call for retreat to the field, a Jabberwocky had landed and was eating his way through the line. While such a sacrifice had allowed for the March Hare, Dormouse, and several troops to reach the armory, they had yet to find safety. As they ran into the castle, the Jabberwocky gave chase. Being just small enough to enter and maneuver after its prey, it smashed through the doorway. When it reached the hallway that led to the throne room, it cast fire that engulfed the whole thing. The troops that fell behind were instantly turned to ash. Still unsatisfied, it pushed its way down the hall, hoping to trap those who remained in the throne room. From the back of the horde came the Black Royalty, with the White Queen on the back of the biggest Jabberwocky in the whole army. Dodging lightning bolts and other Jabberwockies alike, ballista fire whizzed past their faces and glanced off their beast. Before long, they were in reach of the castle. Flying over it, the Jabberwocky spat fire at the remaining ballista. In one pass, White's artillery was demolished by flames. Now the Black Royalty could fly their monsters up to the castle without hindrance. Seeing that the middle of a war was no place for his dying niece, the King of Clubs decided to take White and depart from the conflict. As they flew through the sky, he spotted a cliff that overlooked the entire battlefield, but was out of the way of harm. He took White by the arm, and they dissolved into a cloud of smoke, floating to the ground. When they reached the grassy cliff, the king regained his form, holding the near lifeless White in his arms. In the glow of chaos, he laid her down against a rock. Bending down close to White's face, he spoke with a jaded gentleness. "Now, I want you to watch all of this. Look long and hard at the consequences of your choices. This all could have been avoided so easy. But you just couldn't bow, could you? It's one thing to let yourself suffer, but those screams, do you hear them? Those are the screams of your people dying because of you. And where is the champion that you convinced to side with you, Where's Alan? He's not here, is he? And when he shows up, if he does, he'll be too late, and this little act of defiance will be all for nothing." As flames from the battle danced in her eyes, White watched in horror as her kingdom slowly burned in front of her. She couldn't look away from the death, nor could she cry out to cease it. All she could do was clutch her rose necklace tightly, and pray for my arrival. The truth was, I was out of time. It was as if the very moment I returned to Wonderland had caused the hourglass to tip, each minute of each day being like sand that ran out of my grasp and into the Black Royalties. With each of White's shallow breaths, the bottom of the glass had filled nearly to the top, and from the cliff on which she sat, the last grain of sand was about to fall. That's gonna wrap this video up, guys, and just to close out this episode, I just would like to wish each and every one of you out there the merriest of Christmases, and I hope that however you and your loved ones choose to spend the holiday, you do so safely, and I hope that you enjoy it and have lots of fun, so that we can come back here again when everything's all said and done. I didn't mean to rhyme there, but until next time, guys, we'll see you later.